Dear friends, welcome to Quest for Knowledge. In this video, we will discuss what are functions in Python programming, how to define and call them in a Python program, the difference between parameter and argument, what are default parameters in function, and how to return value from function. So let's begin today's video. So any named blocks of code that are designed to do one specific task is known as functions in Python. It means for repetitive task we define a function. And when a function is defined, it can be reused at multiple places in a program by simply writing the function name. And when we write the function name, we tells the Python interpreter to call the function to perform the task defined in a function. So in Python we have inbuilt functions and we can also define our functions. There is a large number of functions already available in Python and those functions are inbuilt functions. In our previous videos we have discussed all these functions and these are inbuilt functions. We can use these functions directly without defining them because these functions are already defined in Python. And next we have user defined function. We can define our own functions while writing the program. So when we define our own functions, those functions are known as user defined functions. So when we define functions in Python, the definition starts with def keyword. This is one of the Python keywords as we discussed in one of the videos. So this def should be used as it is. First we write def in a small case and then we write function name, and this function name must be valid identifier name. We already discussed the protocol used to name identifier name. Then inside parenthesis we pass parameters. Then we put colon and then we write the instructions, the statements which we want to execute inside this particular function. Then we write return and the value we want to return from this particular function. This particular return statement is also optional. So this particular first line def function name and parameter list is known as function header and this ends with colon. And the instruction that we write inside function should be indented. As we discussed, the indentation in Python is very important. So this function body should be indented. So here we have one Python code showing how to define function. So as we discussed, this hash used to comment in Python. So this particular first statement is comment in Python program. Next is also comment. And then we have function header. So as we discussed, any function definition starts with def keyword. So first we write def keyword, then we write function name. So here function name is add num. Then we put parenthesis. So here we are not passing any parameter, as we have seen parameters are optional. Then we put colon. And as you can see, all the statements inside these functions are indented. So here in this particular function, we are taking input from user. As we have seen in previous video, the use of this particular input functions and int functions. So here we are taking two input from user. Then we are adding these two variables and assigning sum of these two numbers to this sum variable, and then we are printing the value. Next we want to perform this particular task in our program. So as we discuss, when we want to use the function, we simply write the function name. So here we have return add num. So to perform the functions task, we need to call the functions in our program. So here when we write add num and parenthesis, so this particular statement is function calling. So when we call function, so it performs the task return inside the functions. So output of this particular program would be it will ask enter first number. You can write any number. Then it will ask to enter second number, and then it will print the sum of numbers is 11. As you can see in our function definition, we are asking user to enter first number, then we are asking user to enter second number, and then we are printing the sum of value of this variable and value of second variable, and then we are printing sum variable, and this sum variable is holding the sum of these two. A function can also take values, and values defined in function header is known as parameter, and value passed to the function during the function call is known as function argument, right? So let's see argument and parameter in one Python code. So here we have function named sum numbers, starting with this def keyword. Inside parenthesis we have passed one value with name n. So here n is the parameter. Then we put colon, and then function definition starts. So inside this particular function we have one variable with value 0. Then we have returned one iteration statement, for loop. As we already discussed for loop and range functions. If you haven't seen that video, you can watch that video, and link to that particular video is given in the description box. So this particular for loop is adding sum of natural numbers starting from 1 to n, and then it is printing the value of sum, and this particular statement it is printing, and then end of functions. As you can see, these particular statements inside functions are indented, showing that these statements are part of this particular function. Then end of function, and next statement we are taking input from user. As we already seen how to take input from user using this particular input functions, and how to convert that particular input string to integer value. So here num, we are assigning value whatever user is entering, and then we are calling function. So to call function we write function name, and then here we are passing one value num. So whatever user will enter, that particular value will be stored in num variable, and we are passing this num to this function. So here this num is an argument, and whatever value this num will hold, it will pass to this particular n parameter. So here argument is num and parameter is n. So this is the difference between argument and parameter. So parameter is passed at function header, and argument is passed during function calling. And next we have default parameter. So in Python we can assign default value to the parameter, and default value is a value that is pre-decided, right? So let's see this default parameter in Python code. So here we have function definition. So here function is calc si, and functions start from this def keyword, and inside parenthesis we are passing parameter. So here we have 3 parameters, and parameters are separated by comma. So here one parameter is rate, next parameter is principal, and next parameter is time. So here we are writing principal equals to 1000, right? So when we assign value to parameter, that particular parameter is default parameter. So when we call particular function without this particular parameter, so this will be default value to this particular parameter. Next we have time parameter, and default value of this time is 2. Then colon, and logic of this particular function we will write over here, and then here we are calling function. So in first calling we are calling this function with only one argument. So this particular argument, this particular 5, will be assigned to first parameter of this function. That means value of rate will be 5 and value of principal will be 1000 and value of time will be 2 in this particular first function call. When we call the function with 2 parameter, that means the first argument will be assigned to first parameter, value of rate will be 5. Second argument will be assigned to second parameter, that means value of principal will be 2000. So when we don't pass second argument, default value of second parameter will be 1000. So in this particular second calling of function, we are passing second argument. So that means this particular parameter principal will hold 2000 and value of this time will be 2. And in this particular third calling of this particular function, we are passing 3 arguments. So first argument will go to this particular parameter, value of this rate will be 5. Second argument will be stored in second parameter, so value of principal will be 2000, and this third argument will be stored in third parameter, so value of time will be 3. So in this way we can assign default parameter, right? So one thing we need to notice here is default parameters must be the trailing parameters in the function header. That means if any parameter is having default value, then all the other parameters to it right must also have default value. As in this case, if this principal is default parameter, so all other parameters at right side of it must hold the default value. In this particular function header, you can see this is invalid, as in this function header we have first parameter rate, second is default parameter as we have assigned default value to this particular parameter, and next we have parameter, right? So default parameter must be followed by default parameter, right? So this is invalid function header. In next case, we are having default parameter principal equals to 1000, then parameter, and then again default parameter. So this particular default parameter must be the trailing parameters, right? So in between we cannot put the parameters like this, right? So this thing we need to notice, that default parameters must be the trailing parameter. A function can also return value, and to return value we use return statement inside function, and return statement returns the control to the calling function. So let's see it in one example. So here we have function definition. Function name is prime and it is taking one parameter, then colon, and inside we have for loop. We are checking whether this particular number is prime or not. If condition is true, we are returning false, that number is not prime, and if this condition is not true, then we are returning true. So we are calling function is prime and we are checking with this argument 7. So here 7 is argument and this 7 is passed to this n, and this particular return statement returning value, and that value is assigned to this particular result variable, and we are printing value of this variable, right? So this particular code will print true, as in this case this 7 is a prime number. So according to this code we are checking whether this particular passed parameter is prime or not. So in case this particular argument is prime, it will return true, and if this particular parameter is not prime, it will return false, as we already discussed how to write this particular code to check whether number is prime or not.